Wallace Foundation contributing to our understanding of building a pipeline of equity oriented principles? What has been the impact of those initiatives on leadership preparation and practices? Listen here to find out. Welcome, Rotunda, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me, Monica. It's a pleasure to be here to talk to you and to talk with your viewers.
Yeah, definitely. And as we were talking before, I had not realized how quickly 1 year had gone by for you. So, congratulations on a year plus now, I guess.
Thank you so much. It's been a fantastic journey at the Wallace Foundation. I am so pleased to have had the opportunity to learn so much from districts across our country.
Yeah. Well, I guess before we dive into sort of some of the work that you're doing at the foundation, maybe you could tell us a little bit about yourself and what some of your experiences were before joining the foundation.
Sure, happy to do that. Just prior to my beginning my role at the Wallace Foundation, I had the pleasure of serving in numerous leadership capacities in most recently 3 school districts throughout the state of Maryland. My most recent leadership role was serving in the capacity of Associate Superintendent of Schools in one of the largest school districts in the state of Maryland.
Mm.
And in my role, I was responsible for providing leadership, direction, and support for more than 70 school leaders within a more than 200 school district.
Wow.
One of the most exciting parts of my role was really well connected to the work that we do at Wallace, and it is focused on building the capacity of, supporting, and developing principals who are seated as well as those who are aspiring to the role.
Mm. Well, thank you for all those years of good work in the public schools, and more importantly, thank you for bringing all that wisdom to the work that you're doing, sort of nationally now with the Wallace Foundation. So let's sort of just dive in and talk about Wallace's most recent investment in educational leadership, which is the Equity Centered Pipeline Initiative, or ECPI for short. What can you tell us about this initiative?
Yeah, I'm thrilled to talk about ECPI. The Wallace Foundation is supporting 8 school districts in building what we've come to refer to as comprehensive aligned principal pipelines with the goal of developing principals who can advance each district's vision for equity. The districts that we're collaborating with in this project include Baltimore City Schools in Maryland, Columbus City Schools in Columbus, Ohio, the District of Columbia Public Schools, Fresno Unified School District in Fresno, California, Jefferson County Public Schools in Louisville, Kentucky, Portland Public Schools in Oregon, San Antonio Independent School District in San Antonio, Texas, and Winston-Salem Forsyth County Public Schools in North Carolina. It's really exciting to work alongside these districts because they share our belief that all students deserve the opportunity to succeed. But we all recognize that inequities cause barriers to learning for many students. So, as leaders of schools, we believe that principals are uniquely positioned to advance educational equity. We know from our work at the Wallace Foundation from more than 20 years of research that school districts can produce principals who can improve outcomes for students by building principal pipelines comprised of the 7 domains that you might be familiar with: the leader standards focus,
Hmm.
high quality, pre-service principal preparation, selective hiring and placement, on the job training and support for principals, in partnership with principal supervisors, the development of leader tracking systems.
Hmm.
And all of this is undergirded by a focus on building strong systems that allow sustainability of this work. In this particular initiative, ECPI, we're now exploring whether and how districts can use those same 7 domains that I've referenced to produce equity-centered leaders. And we are really interested in supporting these districts over 5 years to see if they can develop what we're referring to now as equity-centered pipelines. What's really exciting about the work that the districts are doing is that the work is locally led by the district, but they do so in partnership with their local community,
Mm.
2 university leader preparation programs, as well as a state agency.
Right. That's this like very powerful sort of triumvirate, right? Of all focusing on this work together.
Absolutely, absolutely. And has made a tremendous difference in how these participating districts see their work
Mm,
and the potential for impact of this work through these collaborations.
right. Um, I know that just from what you said, this issue of aligning is actually quite important. So if you could talk a little bit about how you see that emerging, or what you hope to happen from that alignment.
Yeah, what's really been exciting about the work that we see these districts taking up as they seek to build these equity centered pipelines is that there is collaboration amongst those districts that require them to come together and dialogue with intention around the shared values for their work. That's one of the most significant ways in which we see alignment. But not only that, though the district is at the center of the work, it is not uncommon, we've found over the course of this last 3 years, that there is mutually beneficial opportunity for each of the stakeholders who I named earlier to advance their own organizational strategies and priorities
Okay.
and to connect to and align their work to that of the districts.
Right. So you actually have multiple alignments trying to align, um, which is actually, another way for universities, in particular university preparation, to also be thinking carefully about, their work, their values, and how those are aligned with the work of what's happening in P12.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We see the work of high quality pre service preparation as a key focus for the
Mm,
work of this initiative. And our participating districts actively message that they could not do this work without the partnership of higher ed partners.
right. Which is good news for us. um, and if you could talk about how Wallace is defining equity, in terms of this particular initiative. I know that's been something that's been on a lot of people's minds for many years now, right? But now really bringing that's this clear focus on it is a wonderful thing.
You know, Monica, this is actually a great question that we get more often than you might imagine. While we do at Wallace think about equity in a very specific way, the Wallace Foundation is not imposing a singular definition of equity on the districts that we are partnering with. Each district has actually defined its own vision for equity with input from the community, and they are designing their pipelines with the vision for equity embedded that they have collaborated with their communities around. And what's really exciting about the work is that in partnership with the stakeholders that I mentioned previously, they are iterating on what they learn over time about the needs of principals, along with the interests of their communities. And they leverage the deep knowledge of some of the other partners, like state agencies, as well as members of higher ed communities, to engage in this continuous improvement process.
Right. And just hearing you say that now also makes me think that, actually part of the approach, if that's the right word, of the foundation is to recognize that issues of equity have to be locally driven, and so that's actually part of the equity definition, right? Like it's not something that can
Absolutely.
be imposed, but rather locally driven, locally addressed, and sort of local leadership.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic point. As I mentioned at the top of our conversation, having served in so many different leadership capacities within large school districts myself for nearly 3 decades, many of those districts, not unlike the districts that we are supporting and serving in ECPI, I recognize that context is important. It's thrilling to know that Wallace acknowledges that
Mm,
too. And each district's definition of equity is unique to that district's local context. Despite, though, that uniqueness and context, there have been some really common elements across their approaches to developing equity center leaders.
mm,
For example, each of these district partnership teams is made up of diverse stakeholder groups that influence and support the ecosystem of principals in each of those districts.
mm,
These folks include the principals themselves, principal supervisors, district staff leaders responsible for setting the professional learning priorities for the districts, as well as those representatives from the two university partners that they are collaborating with.
mm. And I think, and I can only imagine for an aspiring leader that living or observing that ecosystem that you talked about is also both aligning. I don't know if that would be the right word, but it also sort of, I mean, on the one hand, inspirational, but the other hand, also thinking about, where do I put my like little brick in the work that needs to happen to improve my school and community. Um, and so, even though the focus is very much on the principal, I can imagine that aspiring leaders in those buildings and communities are paying careful attention to what's being done.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's interesting that you bring that up because I think probably most exciting and impressive in this effort is the many ways in which the districts have interacted with their communities
Mm,
to gather insight and perspective about the ways in which they perceive that leaders at all levels can center equity as a part of their work.
right.
And the university partners with whom our districts are collaborating have played a really significant role in that. So, Baltimore City, for example, who is collaborating with Towson University, has taken a step in engaging their community in co designing opportunities for town halls
Mm,
where both principals can participate as well as those communities can participate.
mhm,
In those spaces, they've done things like co design these equity statements.
mm,
They have enacted communication strategies that ensure all stakeholders know and understand the vision for equity. And
mhm.
they also even bring thought partners into the space in order to be transparent with community members about who and what is driving the focus for the work that they are doing with principals.
Right. Mm. So very much sort of a shared approach to not just identifying issues, but then coming up with solutions and common language for those.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
which is a whole area of work in and of itself. But I think as we talk about, pre-service preparation and high quality pre-service preparation, and it's one of the key, I guess, domains of the principal pipeline, and work that Wallace has been doing for many, many years now. How are the ECPI districts working with their university partners to make sure that their principal preparation is high quality, equity centered, and sort of building on the strengths of the community?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. What's been fantastic to see in these partnerships with districts and these institutions of higher education is just as we know that the districts want pools of principal candidates who are well prepared to meet the real world demands of the role, we also know that the university partners strive to offer the highest quality and most relevant principal preparation programs to attract candidates and to meet the needs of the districts that they serve. That's the reason that the partnerships between the universities and the local school communities are so essential.
Mm,
Um, each district is either developing or revising leader standards and then working closely with their university partners to ensure that those standards will guide the pre service work and preparation
mm,
that the university partner offers. And in some cases, for example, in Columbus City Schools, in partnership with The Ohio State University, there's even collaboration on the development and support of in service principals.
right.
These partnerships, in some cases, even result in more strategic approaches to preparation for assistant principals within the district.
Right. Which is, also unexpectedly, but it's also a wonderful alignment between the research that Wallace has sort of, had Ellen Goldring and her team do on the assistant principalship, and how little is known about the needs of the assistant principalship. And so I think, I mean, that study to me was really challenging. And so to hear you say that the districts are actually beginning to pay attention to the assistant principalship, not just as a stepping stone, but as a source of leadership itself, is really fascinating to hear about what they're doing.
Very exciting also to think about the implications that that focus on assistant principals has to creating coherence in
Mm,
the work of school leaders across each of these participating districts.
right. Yeah. And then also thinking about, like, you've got a whole new generation of also equity-centered assistant principals that'll be prepared to continue the work when they if and when they choose to move into the principalship.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so again, a sort of aligning along lots of different systems, and to have that kind of coherence across these systems. It's becoming something that's a lot clearer, and I think is recognized generally across the country as something that has to happen in order for improvement to be done and sustained.
Yeah, absolutely. I think another element of the work that I've seen university partners actively engage in, as well as the fuller ecosystem be able to engage in and contribute to as a part of the work, is the development of these profiles of equity centered leaders. And you and listeners may be familiar with this term profile, as we've seen this idea really be emergent across the country, with several states beginning to
Mhm,
develop these portraits or
mhm,
profiles of graduates.
right.
So these equity centered leader profiles really do reflect the knowledge,
Mm,
dispositions, and skills and attributes, and even habits of mind that we hope that school leaders who interact with and reflect the district's equity vision are able to possess if they are leading schools within these districts. So this has been quite a useful resource
mm,
in particular for our university partners, as they want to make sure that they are able to leverage these accessible and, in many cases, very succinct descriptions of what districts, as their partners, would want every graduate from their prep programs, whether it be for a certificate or a degree program,
mhm.
to know, understand, and be able to do before they complete programming.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. No, you're right. I sort of begin to hearing echoes of that across, across the country when it comes to P12, right? But then
Absolutely.
increasingly, in leadership preparation spaces, what would be the profile of in this case, and hopefully increasingly like equity centered principals, or leaders, right? I also think one thing that, because of this close collaboration between districts and partnerships, I feel that there has to be a sort of a reverberation maybe within the faculty programs around ongoing learning needs that they might have, as they begin to think differently about what that principle might be, or how do our curriculum and syllabi align. And so I'm wondering if you've seen any of that begin to happen, or in what ways have you seen that happen?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. And there are actually some really powerful examples out there within the ECPI ecosystem. One that I'd love to highlight is the university partnership between Portland State University and Lewis and Clark University, both of whom are partners to Portland Public Schools.
Mhm.
They are leveraging some of this information and knowledge that they're gaining about the interest that Portland Public Schools has as a partner to not only design and redesign coursework, but they are beginning to leverage what they are learning as a resource to redesign their clinical internship experiences for aspirant leaders. And what's really powerful about these partnerships with two university partners is that while one might perceive that there might be a spirit of competition, because these partners are sort of in some ways looking to engage with the same clients,
Mhm.
these partners, Lewis and Clark and Portland State, really have come together in an effort to align their efforts in thinking about the ways in which it can influence the outcomes for the full state.
Mhm. Yeah, which makes a lot of sense, especially in, I don't know the context in Washington necessarily, but in the broader context of sort of a leadership, shortage. Having universities work in collaboration to offer a broader array of learning opportunities for aspiring leaders seems to make a lot of sense.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. Um, I guess maybe shifting our lens a little bit around, what you've learned from this initiative, what you hope the sustained impact might be from this effort. It would be great.
Yeah, well, through a series of independent research studies, we're hoping to learn whether large districts, in partnership with all of the stakeholders that we've spent this time talking about, can create principal pipelines that are capable of producing and supporting leaders who can advance equity within their districts. We're also hoping, though, to be able to understand how local history and district culture shape
Mm,
approaches to equity.
right.
And more specifically, the researchers who are engaged in this component of a study will be able to document the cultural, historical, and organizational factors that district partnership teams have to grapple with as they develop visions, goals, and plans for equity centered principal pipelines. We hope that the results of this documentation will be able to broadly inform the field about such structural factors that might come into play when doing this work. And more importantly, how these teams are able to negotiate them in ways that can give other districts insights into the structural factors that they
Mhm.
have to address in order to be able to successfully engage in this work. Probably most notably of interest to the field is also an interest that we have in learning about developing methods for assessing the impact of equity centered leadership.
Right. Well, that will be it's like that would be a whole other conversation.
Yes. Yes.
And so important, and, I'm laughing, but I recognize, like, that's incredibly important and incredibly complex, and yet, without, sort of clear methods for doing the work and assessing the work and sharing the work, it makes all of this, again, the sort of the sustained nature of this work, a real challenge. Um, I think there's so much we could talk about, and we're gonna have to have you back because I know you're sort of midway through the initiative, and I know the stories of, thinking about, how do you stay focused on the future while recognizing the history in the past, is an important part of these, district stories, which is what you were just saying about the importance of understanding their contexts. But I do think that, having you back and talk more like a year or two from now to see like where the how the learning has evolved, would be really fascinating. And I know we have limited time, but I again, we could talk with you for a long, long time about this work.
I definitely look forward to the opportunity to come back and be with you. And yes, you are right. We are just entering year 4 of this 5-year initiative.
Mm.
And we really do look forward to sharing the research findings with the field when the initiative concludes in 2026. In the meantime, though, you teased a little bit around our hope to be able to share stories of the work happening in the 8 districts through videos, podcasts, and a blog series that's emerging. UCEA has been a long-standing partner of Wallace's, both in informing our work and also sharing lessons learned from the research we commission in the field. So we really do encourage your members to stay tuned to your communications channels to find out along the way what we're learning from ECPI districts.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for that, Rotunda. Thanks for your time today. Thanks again for all the work that you're doing with these 8 districts, but also nationally to sort of continue to make sure that we stay focused on the things that matter to our communities. It's been great talking to you. And again, look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you. Great spending time with you today.